Okay, guys, we're live. So let's get started. All right, so in total, we've got about an hour today. Kelly's going to talk for about 25 minutes to begin with on how to communicate your EVP. She's got a great how-to guide for us and then some homework to make sure that we were all paying attention to what she had to say. And then we're going to have a chat with Kris about his real life experience of implementing and communicating EVPs. So we've got the how-to guide and then the real life experience. So I think it'll be a really good mix between the two. We've also got some time at the end just for Q&A. So any questions, comments throughout, just pop them in the comment section and we'll get to those at the end. For any reason we don't get to everybody's comments or questions, we'll come back to you afterwards on it. Last bit of housekeeping, we will record this and I'll put a link onto YouTube, so I'll pop that in the comment section afterwards. So if anyone misses it or just wants to rewatch it later, I'll share the recording then. I think that's probably it from me. So Kelly, I'll hand over to you.
Awesome. Hi everyone. Thanks heaps for if you're tuning in live with us this morning. So I'm hoping to make this a practical session as much as possible given the time frame. But we're going to look at ways that you can express your EVP and your communication and your recruitment copy without explicitly restating we're flexible or we support you over and over again, because that can get a bit tiring. So I wanted to add a little bit of a disclaimer in here because I think a lot of the times people get into their heads that, oh, we don't have this quirky out there brand, therefore we're never going to stand out. So I just want to reassure you all, I have used rainbow flavored EVP and made this look really punchy to tap into the Skittles references in the event promo, but you don't need to be this out there fairy floss kind of flavored unicorn barfing rainbow coffee sort of brand. Like, we can make you real and authentic and stand out in the same way as well. So I will just kind of get this screen share set up because I've got some wonderful slides that you can, now I forget what the screens were when I was going through them yesterday. I think it was, that would not be the right one. Sorry.
That's what happens. Like 2 screens and 60 tabs.
Oh, 3 screens about it, but and even with a practice session, I still catch myself out. All right, so let us begin, shall we? Right. Now, people always remember, I'm sure you've heard this quote a million times, people always remember how you made them feel more than what you said. And so that, I feel, is the difference, or how to differentiate your EVP from your employer brand. So how can you make sure that what you promise people is actually what they're experiencing when they interact with you? From my perspective and what I see, I think the challenge for most organizations is there's not a lot of consistency with who they say they are and what the actual experience is for people when interacting with them, whether that's as a customer, a consumer, a brand fan, or a candidate or an employee. So what that looks like is the social media page might be like fun and bright and lively, and then people make their way to the career site and it's that monotonous, dull, corporate kind of tone of voice. Or it might be a brand who brags about flexibility, but it comes with 50 conditions. Or they might say that they invest in people and inclusion, yet the job ad has 25 must-haves and 100 should-haves. Or it could be that they promise to value and empower their people, and this is something that I see and I hear about a lot, promising to value and empower their people, yet they're an organization who does the shoulder tap when an employee tries to express themselves and put a post up on LinkedIn and they get that shoulder tap. Actually, no, that's not us. We don't want you showing up like that. So this kind of inconsistency leads to distrust, it leads to confusion and doubt. And what that can look like, it can contribute to if you have high renege rates, if people are pulling out of your recruitment process at the 11th hour, it could be because the messaging that they have had up to that point hasn't matched the reality of their experience in the interviews. Or it could be if you have new hire turnover, it's the same sort of thing there as well. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it could be a contributing factor to those things. So when you are showing up authentically, when you're communicating your EVP and your brand consistently, then you're going to be better able to attract the right kind of people to your organization. And you're also going to be repelling those who aren't the right fit, because we're not a fit for everyone. If you see my copy, I am certainly not a fit for everyone out there, and that is okay. I don't want to appeal to everyone, and you shouldn't want to do that either. So let's look at the how we do that. How you can express your values and your benefits creatively in, now I'm a writer, so I am coming at this purely from the written communication perspective, so just adding that in there as well. But the first thing you want to do is be crystal clear on your what and your why. What is your brand position difference? And I think this is important at the moment because there's this fear of, well, our EVP sounds the same as everyone else. And if you did the previous session with Striving, then you would have had some valuable tips there of how to craft a non-vanilla looking EVP. But at the end of the day, there's a good chance that many of you out there are offering things like flexibility or progression or inclusion and things like that. And it's okay that your offer at the base of it, that the foundation, that your offer is similar to what other people are doing. But it's how you communicate that and how you create meaning for your ideal audience that is the way that you're going to connect with the people that it matters with. Some examples. Looking at flexibility is one, because I think after the COVID lockdowns and everyone working from home, it is something that our candidate motivators have changed. People want to have that work-life balance and that flexibility, and it is more important for them now when applying for jobs. So what does flexibility actually look like in your organization? Because I bet you that it looks entirely different from someone else. I'm going to use government as an example because I worked with government for years, and I was a single and childless 20-something woman at the time. So flexibility for them was I could start my day at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock. I would do an early gym class, and that's when I could get into work. And then I could leave at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and that meant I could go home and veg on the couch, let's be honest, or go for a run around the river. That was usually how I ended one day of the week with my best friend. So that was the flexibility that I had. But being that I was childless, it was not easy for me to access like working from home. That was something that was kind of reserved for people who lived longer distances away, or they had children and things like that they needed to be home for. Whatever it is, I loved that kind of flexibility, and that it just meant that I could end my day earlier and use those final twilight hours how I wanted to kind of relax and unwind from the day. Contrast that with Canva. I'm going to use Canva as an example, and it's just because someone who works there has recently had this experience and spoke about it on LinkedIn, and that, like, Charlotte has just returned from this 6-week work from anywhere program overseas, and so it was kind of like this working holiday thing for her. And this is something that all employees can access. That to me is having a flexible approach. Like, there's some flexibility in there as well. And so that is probably not the kind of flexibility that government could facilitate. So it's like just getting clear on what your offer means for your particular people and kind of spelling it out with clarity. A copywriting tip here is that so you can. So you keep asking why, like, why is this important to us? Why should you care? How is this going to impact you? And then answering with so you can. So it's like with this, say, the 6-week work from anywhere program, why is that important? Because when you live your happiest life, you bring your happiest, most productive self to work. why is that important? So you can better serve our customers. So you can be more innovative and productive and collaborative, because these are all proven things. With happier customers, we'll have them more people spending money, which means that we can earn more to do the things that provide meaning for us. And again, using Canva as an example, they donate a percentage of their profits to charity and to doing good. So yeah, it's about really nailing your what and your why, and how that actually affects or benefits the people personally. Now we're going to look at brand voice, which might be why many people are tuning in. There's a bit of a curiosity about brand voice, I think. But brand voice is the personality that your brand takes on using words. So how you make your audience feel when they interact with you online. So we've all kind of experienced, and maybe you are still currently, that corporate tone, that convoluted, monotonous, dry kind of language, and it just creates this dull and meaningless kind of experience. It's really easy for our eyes to glaze over, for us to kind of skim through content, or to not read it and get rid of it entirely. So this is the cost of blending in, and people using that tone because they think that it's a way, it's what they need to do, it's how they look professional, or what have you. But these days it's a consumer driven, but it's leached out, and it's now just generally in every interaction that we have with brands, with organizations. We expect that human experience. We don't want to feel like a number. We don't want to feel like we're talking to a robot. We want to feel like we're communicating with a human, and a human is talking directly to us. The thing with brand voice that I need to another disclaimer, shall we say, is it needs to be consistent with your consumer brand voice. So it's one brand. It all needs to be consistent across the board for every audience. The difference is your messages will be changing. So how you communicate and how you appeal to candidates and employees is going to be kind of different to how you, the messages and that you're communicating with customers and the community. But your personality and the energy remains consistent across. So thinking of yourself here, your personality, how you show up at your grandmother's funeral is going to be, it's still you, but it's a modified version of you to suit that environment and that setting. Whereas how you show up when you're hanging out with your friends having coffee, it's still you, but it's, it's that more fun and more setting appropriate version of you. So this personality is going to shape how people feel when they interact with you at those different milestones and these different touch points. So your corporate values, your EVP, your brand mission, your brand position, your audience, these all shape how your brand should be showing up online. Thinking from the micro moments, which copywriters are always get a bit frothy over people who do a good job of micro moment copy, but that's like chatbots or product copy, or error messages like 404s. These are micro moments, which are opportunities to bring brand into it. But also for a recruitment perspective, you're looking at like candidate emails, career site, job ads, sales copy, things like that. Are you presenting a consistent message and a consistent brand experience throughout all of those touch points? Without oversimplifying it, because voice is complex to get there, I would suggest talking to marketing just to get their guidance, to ask them to walk you through what the consumer brand voice is, because that should be fairly established. If you don't have a marketing team supporting you, or you're not able to outsource, like to get help with that, then you could try Googling like Carl Jung's 12 brand archetypes. That might give you some inspiration. It might, there might be one archetype there that stands out and resonates with the way that your organization presents itself. And so you can use that, to guide you on how you will do that. So first thing, you want to be thinking about human attributes, like are we friendly, charming, funny, inspiring, blunt, posh, or like clever? Then you want to be thinking, how do you want your audience to feel when they interact with you when you're communicating across all of these touch points? So that could be inspired, delighted, safe, confident, etc., of course. Then you want to define the language that you will and you won't use, and the emotion that you will and you won't evoke. And having these containers is really important because it just kind of helps clarify how you can show up and how you absolutely will not be showing up. Some quick examples here. Who gives a crap toilet paper? They are my favorite. They are the stereotypical like jester brand. They are like irreverent and lighthearted. They bring genuine joy. Like I'm so happy when I read their stuff. I usually giggle. But they are also a mission-led brand, and they do good for the world. So they've got that kind of inspiring motivational element to them as well. And as I promised, your brand doesn't need to be like quirky and creative and bold to be different. So looking at like charities, gyms, personal trainers, things like that, these are motivational brands. These are stereotypical hero brands generally. You could check out Nike as an example to see how they evoke a sense of motivation and this triumph over adversity. And hint, it's obviously through story and the hero's journey tale. All right, now we want to add emotions to your values and benefits. Now, you're not going to be able to do this to every single element of your pitch, but when you're going through there, it's like, well, where are the places that we can really draw on emotion to amplify our message? An example here again is a client that I'm currently working with, so I can't give too much away, but one of their core benefits is career development and progression. A lot of people are saying that, right? Even though they're doing absolutely amazing things in this space and the way that they're offering this, everyone's kind of saying something similar. So how do they stand out? And this is where you want to be using like your employee language. So when you went about crafting your EVP and going through that process, presumably you may have interviewed a few of your employees. And so what were the trends there in their responses? What is the language that they were using kind of consistently throughout the different interviews? So for my client, a word kept coming up across all different role profiles and things like that. And that was before they joined my client, they felt stagnant in their career. And this word stagnant was everywhere. And I was like, I am going to use that. And so for you, like I asked for you to consider when you see the word stagnant, what image does that conjure up for you? So for me, it's like slimy, dank pond scum. That's what I think when I think of stagnant. Imagine having that image attached to the way you see your career. So this is a genuine candidate fear that's being presented here. And so you can, forgive me, I am a marketer, manipulate that fear. You stick your finger in that wound and you twist it and you agitate it and you amplify it. And then you use, and obviously this needs to be brand aligned. So please always bear that in mind when I talk about marketing tips and advice. It needs to be brand aligned. But the opportunity then is to use this uplifting, motivating and inspiring language that evokes this sense of like trust and excitement about the possibility for their career when they join your organization. So that is a client example. So some ways you can do that: literary devices and language tools. So you're thinking along the lines of like rhythm and pace, dialogue, story, puns, alliteration. These are all tools that you can use to bring emotion and personality to life on the page in your words. Employee stories, I won't dwell on this because I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times. But it's not just, don't just think of it from the perspective of these polished, packaged, video stories that you include on your career site. They're amazing, and I think They're very valuable when they underpin your core brand pillars. It's really good to have those stories there to kind of sell that. But you want to be thinking also like just the everyday experiences, and don't look at it from like marketing. Think of it more like documenting, hey, this is what's possible here. So your options there, like I think most people rely on their employees to kind of stick a post up on LinkedIn and talk about it. But you also want to be thinking about communicating it internally as well, because you want your existing employees you kind of want to reinforce and remind them that these amazing opportunities and experiences are accessible to them as well. Again, with that client, like they've got an employee at the moment. So my client is remote first. They have this employee who's currently on this multi-week bike packing tour through Thailand, right? So she's obviously going to be talking about that experience, but you could be doing just something like on the staff notice board, on the intranet site, the CEO email out or whatever. And it's just, you're not making this big song and dance and this big marketing sales pitch about this experience, but it could just be like, generally referencing it. And it's like, we're all living vicariously through Gertrude over the next 6 weeks as she sweat packs through Thailand. And hey, here are her adjusted hours if you need to get in contact. So it doesn't, keeping it kind of simple, but also communicating the value there. And then finally here, you want to be applying your voice and your key messages and stories at every talent touch point. So that's the candidate journey, but also internally for your employees as well. Here is an example of a candidate touch point journey from that awareness stage where they first hear about your brand all the way through to like nurture, engagement, and onboarding. And these are all opportunities. This isn't an exhaustive list, by the way. This is just some starting points for you. And I think like this is what I was saying about consistency before, is like people might put emphasis into their social media posts, but then they don't carry it through into creating tip sheets or their talent emails or case studies or anything like that. It kind of, they focus on one and then they forget about the million other opportunities to do that. I want to give another example because examples are amazing. So to help you visualize how this could look, right? Say that you're a charity or a healthcare brand. So that's like the nurturer brand archetype. And the point of this brand is they want their audience to feel safe and supported and nurtured and valued. So thinking about the candidate experience, like through recruitment, the candidate communication, how they can present that element of their brand and that, hey, we value you and we support you and we want to empower you to be your best when you work with us, then it should be like an overly communicative, thinking about it maybe from like a clinical patient care kind of perspective where you're holding someone's hand throughout this process, showing up at the different recruitment touch points. And it could be like, hey, this is what's coming up next. Here's what you can expect for the next part of our process. Or, hey, you're heading into video interviews. So here are some top tips for you because we want to see you thrive. So that is how you're kind of presenting that value and that brand promise, but without actually specifically saying all the time, hey, we support you, you're amazing. So having a think there, like, is your promise communicated consistently across all the channels? And that's even like, again, remembering internal channels like your newsletters, CEO updates, your LMS, like those core scripts can be hideously boring. Like, how can you inject some personality? HR policies and job descriptions, that's the internal, not the job ad. They're usually 20 pages long and people, like, we glaze over, they don't get read. So how can you be capitalizing on that opportunity to kind of communicate your values and your brand there? Let's look at some quick examples because I am running out of time. So this is Skittles. Just noting this is their marketing site, not their career site. They go through Mars and that's much more sensible. But nowhere on this page does Skittles say, hey, we're fun and silly and quirky. But if you look at the language they use, so this is their about. This is the about Skittles, by the way. Their wordplay, so like from outer space to inner peace, multicolored clearance required, and even to the story that they tell about their origins. Like it's all fun and it's all playful, but they don't actually use those words. Next is HR Tech, and 2 examples there. These are both from their career site. So with the first one, I wanted to draw attention to voice. It's fun, it's friendly, it's chatty, and it's cool. And the words and the language that they use on the page, it feels inclusive and it's warm and it evokes a sense of belonging. And specifically, I mean here, they say, but even more, we want you to add to our vibe. Smile at your witty remarks, share your guilty pleasures, see you grow. You really are most welcome. So that's just one example, hopefully, to help you to visualize all this. Moving along to their value, which is trust and empower each other. And so this is, I'm bringing it back to that consistency thing again. When you say that we trust and empower each other to come up with new ideas, we want people to shine and build and grow together. We hire smart people who have the freedom to do their jobs in the best possible way. So if this is something that you're sprouting on your career site as a value, but then you're an organization that does the shoulder tap, disconnect, guys, disconnect. Whereas this is with this kind of brand, and I truly believe that they don't do that. I truly believe they live their values, I should say. But how you would show this value is that you would be celebrating your people's expertise in like case studies. You would be getting them to either consult on or write the case studies and then presenting them and sharing them. Employee stories, obviously, or inviting them to contribute to like subject expertise articles, whether for your brand or if you just encourage them, if they're building a personal brand on LinkedIn and you're encouraging them to show up and share that online, that is how you would demonstrate that you are a company who trusts and empowers their people. Quickly here, who gives a crap? Like I said, love them. Mission-driven brand, do good, lighthearted, fun, and friendly. So this kind of language, it makes me feel happy. It makes me feel included. And if I worked for them or was a customer, which I genuinely feel I need to be doing this now, I would genuinely feel that I was doing good in the world and contributing to the good in the world. How this looks, it shows up. They talk about their impact. They talk about social issues and their response to those issues. They endorse and support their employees to champion the rights that matter to them. And what that is saying then, which ties in with their tagline, is we give a crap. And then another quick one, too long, don't try reading this, but maybe check them out afterwards if you're not aware of them already. Digital Picnic, I love them. Their promise is this human-centric, inclusive, well-being focused, progressive policies, servant leadership, and like truly empowering their people to be their best. How this comes across: high transparency and openness. They tell a lot of stories about their daily interactions with clients and with their people. They celebrate their people. They use a fun and friendly and jolly voice. And they're inclusive. Their messaging is really warm, and I genuinely feel like I would belong there if I went to work for them. I finished. That's it. I do have a writing exercise, so depending how we go, we can come back to that. Sorry, at the end anyway.
We'll definitely come back to that. Thank you for that, Kelly. It was awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, random. So, Kris, because we were going to ask you the follow-up questions, Kelly's already obviously touched on a couple of examples there. I particularly love the High Bob example. We were geeking out about that the other day. What examples have you got, maybe people that you've worked with or just ones that you've seen of who've done a particularly good job of communicating their EVP?
Yeah, thank you everyone, and by the way, Kelly, that was awesome. I've actually been, for anyone who noticed me looking down, it wasn't just my cat interrupting me, it was also me taking notes, which I'll always do. I'm a serial note taker, as you can see from behind me. But yeah, in terms of examples, I've worked for a few organizations where I've been very lucky, I think, and advantageous enough to go in where they don't have much of an EVP, if anything at all, and had the chance, even as a talent leader, which anyone that's on the call who's a talent leader knows that you quite often have to wear 55 hats like most jobs nowadays. And I've had the chance to contribute and be involved in the implementation or the initiation of EVP. But then coarsely in the talent branding, employer branding, DE&I initiatives, which all very much tie in together. A lot of people try and separate them out and work on them individually in certain areas. But in terms of examples, I've actually coincidentally, Kelly, got the Canva example as well, which I've used with a couple of clients. And the reason that I've used the Canva example is that for me, I know people who work there, I know people who have been there and moved on, and they're very transparent around what they deliver internally versus what they extrude externally. And it's everywhere. It's on their career page, it's on their about pages, it's their life pages, it's their everything that they endorse kind of comes to life. And the people that I know who have worked there, and some of them are still there, have very much said that it does come to life. I mean, if you look at the sort of raison d'etre is along the lines of be a good human, value good communication, being open, honest, and constructive, both individually and as part of a team and across the company, etc. And it certainly does seem like they deliver on that. So, I mean, for me, going into an organization, being under the hood, the one thing I will always say is if you're not transparent, I'll be the first person to tell you that you're not transparent. For those that are on the call who know me, I don't really fluff in between. It's black or white or nothing in between. And I'm aware that 1% of people don't like that, and that's 100% okay. But from an EVP and an EV standpoint, it has to be transparent, open, honest. If you're delivering to the external market, whether it's prospective candidates, prospective clients, partners, vendors, etc., and then they start working with you, whether it's an employee, a partnership, a vendor, a paid client, whatever it is, if they then realize within usually the first 6 to 9 months that something isn't transparent, or if it happens to be everything's not transparent, where do you think that person's going? I can guarantee they're not staying with you, especially as an employee and as a client, a partner, etc., a customer. That then goes out into the external market and it grows legs and grows wings and arms and it spreads. In terms of the examples here, I'll probably use maybe 2. And I noticed that someone put in the comments that they love a good day in the life of story. When I was at AWS, one of the sort of creations or one of the sort of things that we took in and we ended up scaling globally was an engineering learning series. So right across sort of 60,000 plus engineers across the globe, we created events that were cleverly marketed at, here's your chance to use AWS tools and technologies on the AWS platform, which you usually wouldn't get the chance to do unless you were a really high-end customer or an employee. And the talent team marketed it as get your chance over 2 or 3 days to come in, work on our platform with our technology free of charge and learn from the engineers. We then reverse engineered that into day in the life of videos, which are all over the YouTube channel. So it gave people, one, the chance to be in on the inside and see what it was like, but hear not from talent, not from me as a talent leader, not from an HR leader, not from a department head, from the engineers themselves, which initially was a lot of fun, teaching them how to present, how to be in front of a couple hundred people because they hated it to start with, and within 2 or 3 sessions they loved it. But we sort of did it the opposite way. As opposed to day in the life of and evolving it into something, we created the events and then reverse engineered it into day in the life of events, which again, from an EVP standpoint, it was engineers speaking about what it was like to be there, a day in the life of, but teaching it to others. And then coincidentally, 80% of the people that attended were like, can we have a job? And the talent teams were like, yes, of course you can. So it was clever from a lot of aspects. The other example that I'll probably use is Planet, which was my sort of first talent leadership role, where I went into an organization with 0 people teams, 0 HR, 0 TA. It was myself and the HRD for quite a while, just by ourselves, creating EVP. It's a consulting organization in the testing and the QA space. And the employees were predominantly, when we went in, 350 to 400 people were made up of predominantly contractors. So they actually felt like they were more part of the client's organization from a values perspective than they were part of Planet. So we very quickly flipped the contracting side to permanent employees. But then along the way, we had to then say, okay, what do you engulf from a Planet perspective as the organization and the employer that makes you want to be part of us? Because it was even little things like on LinkedIn, on Glassdoor, people weren't even putting that they were part of Planet. They were putting they were part of X a client, Y a client. I won't mention any big names from their client list, but it was a starting from scratch. So we then had to look at, and a lot of people don't realize how much is involved in the EVP sort of standpoint. A lot of people look at the key indicators like compensation and benefits, but they don't look at the organizational environment. They don't look at career development. They don't look at the culture. And then they also don't split up these sort of main headers. Like compensation isn't just salary, it's raises and promotions. Benefits isn't just the fact that you get healthcare and you get a commute to work allowance, which not a lot of companies do. It's insurances, it's leave entitlement, it's cost contributions. And then again, and I could break up the others as well, environment that you're in is work-life balance. I actually prefer to call it work-life fit as opposed to balance, because you've got to fit into the work-life culture of that business for it to be a balance. But recognition, the purpose of the organization, your purpose of actually being there in the organization has to be conveyed and communicated transparently. Career development is also training and mentoring, two-way feedback or 360-degree feedback, growth pathways, development in terms of learning, externally and internally. And then the culture piece is a lot of people think the culture is just DE&I, and that's an area that I'm passionate about, that I've helped organizations grow, and I still continue to do now that I've sort of branched out on my own. But it's also transparent management, the mission, vision, and values, DE&I, belongingness, like all of these things have to encompass EVP. And I've had the chance to do pockets of each at organizations, and I've had the chance to do it at startup and scale up, and also into enterprise with very recently Wipro of 240 plus thousand people. And I mean, Amazon, I think, was 750,000 people when I went in, and 900 and something when I left. And I think now they're, give or take a few 100,000, which is weird to say. They're probably 1.3 million employees globally or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I've had the chance to be involved in a lot of these examples. And quite when I heard you mention Canva, Kelly, I thought, oh my goodness, that's one of my examples as well. We should probably have spoken before this. So be it that we didn't at any great length. But you mentioned the what and the why, which I think is super important. A lot of people know the what they need to do, but they don't know why they're communicating it or why they're doing it. And then a lot of people, which you didn't mention a lot of, you mentioned it in little pockets, Kelly, is also the how. And a lot of people have got ideas of how other organizations are doing this, how other organizations are communicating this, but it's actually how do you implement, evolve, or how do you take it to market? And again, that's where very luckily people like you and I, Kelly, and even LJ in the marketing space get involved in that stuff as to what steps do you need to take, what steps can you take now, and how does that evolve? And that for me is the big one. When you get under the hood, even for sort of a day or two with clients that I'm working with now, they don't understand what level they need to be at now with the how do we communicate it, how do we implement it, how do we drive it? And then also don't get ahead of yourself. Organizations that put their hand up to say, hey, I don't know how to implement this, I kind of know what I'm doing and how I need to do it. And you mentioned brand voice, which a lot of organizations I've noticed don't tie it back into organizational pillars or company values and goals. There's a kind of cross off of, we're going to communicate, as you said, that we are shitting rainbows and telling fairy tales. And then on the other side, that we don't really know what to communicate to the external market. EB and EVP go hand in hand. And one's simply, what are you telling the external market versus how are you actually treating that to the internal employee base? And again, everyone's at their own stage of the journey. And those are probably the two examples that I would use. I mean, at Wipro, we had a huge task in our hands around EVP because a lot of organizations, people, candidates, etc. globally see Wipro very much as just an Indian SI. And that's because it's 75 years of growing up in India, being one of the biggest organizations in tech, like a Microsoft or AWS, external to the sort of Asian market. And we had a huge job of trying to change the external brand perception of not just being an Indian SI, but being a true driver of talent transformation, et cetera, et cetera. And again, which hugely difficult, because when you mention that name, people immediately think Indian SI. And it was about me and the teams very slowly communicating to the external market. We do more than that, but being obviously cognizant of the fact that they're very proud of their heritage and should be, because it's a hugely successful organization. But I could go on with examples all day. I'm sure you could as well, Kelly. You mentioned a few names, but I guess that's a couple of examples from me, Laura, on kind of where I've taken it and where I've had the chance to. And right now I'm working with a few clients who are on the journey and just need to take it that next step. And some organizations are like, we don't have a voice to market. How do we create it? Which both are equally as exciting, I think, as opposed to it just being always a start from scratch.
Totally. I guess on that, so with the ones that you're kind of working on now, what are you seeing as the main barriers for people doing this? Because I think like we're obviously all here because we're not all nailing it. So what are the kind of barriers that are stopping people?
Yeah, I'll probably emulate a little bit. Apologies, my insulin pump's beeping. I'll maybe give a little bit from what Kelly said there. I think the one thing that most people struggle with is that transparency piece. Actually taking your organizational pillars, and most organizations have got them locked down and know what they are and know how those tie into what they do with business. But it's the transparency of then taking it to market. A lot of people, and this is where some companies in the sort of startup scale-up space that I'm working with or have worked with in the past sort of 12 to 16 weeks, have come to me to say, hey, we've got, especially in the talent space, which is what my sort of forte is, but EB, EVP, DE&I, et cetera, will always tie into that, are coming to say that the biggest loss for us is within the first 6 to 9 months is the biggest amount or the biggest metric of people that leave our organization. And I then have to look at twofold. Okay, what is your internal communication to your current employees with regards to what is the value proposition to them? And also, how are you taking that to the external market? And quite often it's like there's a huge difference in the weighing scale of, okay, you're telling the external market, and Kelly hit on this about 5 or 6 times, you're telling people that you're doing all of these amazing things, like 20 things to the market. But yet when people come on the inside, they're like, oh, but I have to be tapped on the shoulder, I'm metriced on it, I'm watched over my shoulder and whatever. And I often say, look, the one thing that you get from me again is honesty. And that's what you need to put into your external voice and your external market perception. And if your external market perception is that you deliver that, then you need to look at 2 of the biggest indicators, the compensation and benefits side, to make sure that they tie up to what the external market thinks. Or you need to rebrand and think about recommunicating actually what you can deliver on. For me, it's that honesty piece. As I said, like the first thing I will tell people when they want to work with me as a consultant or an advisory service is, look, if you can't take bold honesty, then I'm probably not the right person to be working with. Because if I think you're doing something great, I'll 100% communicate it with you. But on the opposite end, if I think that you're doing something really poor, I'll also be the first person to call you out on it. And then we can work as to how to bridge the gap in between. And I think that's the biggest sort of barrier to entry, is that people communicate and they want to communicate that everyone's doing an amazing job and everyone loves this company, etc. But if the people on the inside don't actually love the company and are leaving after 3 months when they hire them, there's a disconnect somewhere. And you just need to figure out figure out the what, and then, as Kelly said, the why, and then for me, the how. I think that's kind of the order that I tend to take. It's not everyone's approach, but what is the gap? Why is there a gap, and what is the reason for it? And then how do we deliver on that promise of sort of recommunicating it to the external market? I mean, Kelly mentioned job boards and how you communicate that sort of stuff. The amount of organizations that don't even have their interview process on their career site, and then they don't communicate it at all. And I'll maybe use AWS as a slightly negative example, that it's not communicated massively, but most of the market know that they go through loop interviews. So you have to do between 4 to 6 or 7 interviews in a day. And I had to go through that. I was part of AWS. It's probably the most exhausting, but also one of the most exciting things I've been through, because at the end of it, I had no idea what had happened. And like, usually, if you're being successful or not. I was like, oh my goodness, I've got no idea. And that's because you're marked and indexed and metriced on different areas, but from the same people in different areas in different ways. It's clever. But that's communicated to the external market that you go through an initial screen, you go through this, then you go through a loop interview stage, and then it's debriefed by a bar raiser who gets the collective together of interviewers. So the external market know exactly what to expect before they go in. And it's little things like that. And that's a very small thing. But then on the other side, companies who say we offer all of these benefits, as Kelly said, and some people do say that, like that 6-week work from anywhere. A lot of companies now are adopting the 1-week work from anywhere. And that can be great for an organization, even a 2 or 3 day work from anywhere. Whatever your organization can facilitate or can come to, it doesn't have to be a 6-week. Canva have blown most people out the water with that particular benefit. But transparency, honesty for me is 100% key. And it's all of the little things, but until you're under the hood, you don't know. And some companies don't even realize, oh, we should be communicating that. And that's just because you don't know what you don't know. Until someone points it out, you're never going to know that you should be there or you should be doing something. So, yeah, I mean, each organization to their own. And I think, and I'll be selfish here because I now have set up my own business, is the first stage to fixing something is putting your hand up and admitting that you need either internal or external help. Whether you, as Kelly said, whether you've got the teams there who can do it, which is amazing if you do have that facility in your organization, or putting your hand up and saying, I need help from an external advisor or a consultant or whatever. The money that you will save, the ROI that you will create by fixing these things, and a lot of people look at it as a bottom line cost, same as any HR and TA department. It's often looked at as a bottom line cost or a cost center rather than a value added service or an engine room. And that's the same as an external service. The money that you will save long-term by not needing to rehire or find new clients when they leave, when they realize that you're not being transparent, or find new partners when they don't want to work with you because your social and environmental responsibilities are communicated external as X and internal, they're nothing like that. Like all of this stuff matters. And yeah, I mean, it's just about getting under the hood. Kelly's probably done it a million times more than I have. So, but I'll always give examples to people, and Canva happens to be one of them.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for that. Just looking at time, I'm going to skip over to questions. So Kelly, Kris, whoever wants to jump in on these. So Hannah was first up. So I'll just pop her question on screen. Oh, flicked up and then went down. Come on, computer. You can do this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Click once more. It's up. It's good.
There we go. I'd love to hear your thoughts and examples of the use of employees as brand ambassadors, using your EVP key messages to attract talent, and then any specific public sector examples. I love how specific Hannah was on that. Who wants to jump in?
Want to go first, Kelly?
Oh, do I want to, or do you?
Whatever. No. I'm not first. It's actually a topic that we spoke about last week. This is actually a very relevant question. Funny enough, as part of Striving's peer mentoring group, which I'm part of, we spoke about exactly this. I think creating brand ambassadors within your organizations, there's a few platforms that you can use to do this. Because those platforms weren't quite as evolved in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, I opted to do this manually with a lot of my teams. And I think it's a great point. It's a great question that not enough departments, even talent departments, I don't think are brand ambassadors enough for their own organization to promote exactly what's going on in the inside to the external world. I'll give, again, a couple of examples here. Maybe the last 3 organizations that I've worked for, AWS, Zip, and Wipro, particularly Wipro, I created a 40-page PowerPoint presentation with exact examples for job boards, for posts, from everything from creating your own personal brand. And that's the other thing that a lot of teams within organizations think, but if I consistently post, it becomes kind of cringy. It doesn't, because if you unselfishly look at it, you're also creating your own personal brand. And I used to say to my teams across Asia Pacific, if you want to move on, I will hopefully have helped you create enough of a personal brand through the organization vehicle that people will know who you are, what you deliver, what you're all about in the external market. So I didn't selfishly look at it as you need to stay within my team, or you need to be part of the department I happen to head up or manage in certain aspects. I don't think enough organizations do this very well. And that also, for me, is an indication that the external market, there's only maybe 5 or 10 organizations that have that perfect social platform of content calendar usage where organizations can chip in, put content in, and then all teams. I don't think it should just be people in HR teams and TA teams. I think it should be all teams that do this, everything from CEO and board level right down to the most junior people within an organization. I've always been a brand ambassador in every organization I've been in, and people would say I maybe post too much, but is there such a thing? Even if people are negatively commenting on what you've put up, any publicity is good publicity. Any marketeer will tell you that. I don't care who you are, they will tell you that that's the right thing to do. I just think that not enough teams are pushed maybe to do it. And yes, I went out and I did it manually. I then sent my 40-page presentation to marketing and said, hey, can you make sure that it's the right font, the logos are in the right place, just to make sure that it was on brand before I sent anything out. And then a lot of these platforms that I'm speaking about, the sort of social content calendar platforms, marketing can have direct access to it. Now, I had to do this a little bit manually, particularly at Wipro, and I worked with a lot of the brand teams globally. We actually created talent marketing teams around this, and each week they would send me a plethora of here's Facebook posts, here's Twitter posts, here's LinkedIn posts, here's general social media posts or Facebook posts, and all we had to do was copy the content across, so copy the wording and then change it so that it suited what message you speak in, what the language is that you use. But that helped the teams then start to create a visual aesthetic that people eventually would be like, oh, that's Wipro, or oh, that's so-and-so from TA at Wipro. And that then becomes repetitive. It becomes known. People get it into their brain. Oh, that's Kris from Wipro posting about something to do with X. So I mean, that whole brand ambassador piece, I don't think enough teams do it, and it's expected that it's done from the people teams. I think it should be done from everyone. I think if you've got the right sort of platform, whether it's manually internally like I've done, or whether it's a social platform, and if by the way, if anyone wants to know any of these amazing social platforms, reach out to me. I could give you introductions to a few of these globally that I think do it almost perfectly and really seamlessly. But I don't think it should just be people teams that have that responsibility, or TA teams. I think it should be executive teams, marketing teams, operational teams, sales teams, finance teams. Everyone should be a brand ambassador of the organization. If you're not, I would question, what are you doing working for an organization you're not passionate about shouting about? And I'm sorry if that's boldly honest. I'm sorry I'm Scottish in a way, but yeah.
No, I think the key bit you said in there was enabling people and giving them something, because I think it's all very well saying that you want people to be brand ambassadors, but if you don't give them the tools, most people don't know where to start. So I think it is about creating the content and things to give people a starting point. I think the other thing I'd say, when it's worked well in different places I've worked at, it's probably doubling down on those people that are doing a great job of it and really championing them to everybody else as the example of like, this is what you want to do, because then you're kind of creating that little bit of FOMO and people want to get involved at that point, but you're also kind of really showing what the example is and like the benefits of it really. Kelly,
can I jump in? Oh, I do. I was going to respond with the personal brand angle as well. And with that, like, because I think organizations traditionally, and I can't say all, but many, have kind of been fearful of their people speaking up online, because there's this whole, we have to sprout the narrative, and it has to, they take consistency to the extreme, and then it removes that authenticity. So I think that is why maybe there's a perception among a lot of people that I can't show up and be myself, not necessarily because of the experience they have with their current employer, but previous organizations. But to that, I just wanted to add two things. The first thing is, again, going back to this client that I'm working with at the moment, some of the feedback from and this was like their tech team, and they were saying that what they look for when they're looking at other companies is, do their employees have a voice? So are those employees, are those experts out there? Are they showing up on LinkedIn? Are they in forums? Are they speaking at events and things like that? Is the company championing them? And if they are, then it shows them that the employer trusts their people, So there's that kind of hidden value thing that, I don't know, maybe people don't think of it that way. They just think of it that big, shiny, this is our message that we're trying to communicate. But underneath all that, what that shows is that you're an employer who trusts its people, and that is of high value to a lot. The other thing that comes up for me in my work, because people fear writing, they do like this whole, I'm not a writer, I can't write. And so I think if you are even presenting people with some, not scripts, but like starters, like caption starters and things like that, it's all well and good, but sometimes there's that permission that, like, people need that permission. They need permission to be themselves and the confidence to write. And so I would say you may have more luck if you invest in that writing coaching or something like that, like how like it could be personal branding. Like if they are subject matter experts, then maybe they don't want to rely on a script. Maybe they really want to go full forward and be themselves online. And so it's like supporting them with whatever the training or the coaching and things are that they need to have that permission to show up and just to write as themselves.
I love that. It's a really great point. Okay, next question. And I managed it first time. While job adverts are a great way to promote EVP, I think it's equally critical to implement the EVP in an interview process too. Have you got any examples of organizations that have managed that? Kris, I'm going to look at you for that one. No pressure.
I mean, I could give a few examples of even organizations that I've worked for who perhaps didn't have this perfected when I went in. And over time we evolved. I'll maybe use Zip as an example, because I think, again, their EVP is similar to a couple of the examples that Kelly showed. Very young, dynamic, fun, forward-thinking, etc. And I mean, even now, with the stock price being massively down on what it was 24 months ago, they're still striving to be a differentiator in the market, but communicating that very transparently through the two founders, through Larry and Pete. That here's what we are trying to do, here's the difficulties we've been through, but here's how we're trying to change them. And that, again, comes right back through it. And I deliver, funnily enough, for this question, I deliver interview training and interview reinitiation training to organizations externally. And I did this also with Zip from the internal looking outwards. And a big part of that transparency was everyone within the interview process alluding transparently and honestly what their experiences are with the organization, how they came to light of being in the organization, and what they've went through so far. And a lot of that ties to the company pillars and then ties back. And a lot of the TA team, like Connor, who heads up the TA team now, and a lot of the others within that team teach the organization and new people coming in what interviewing at Zip kind of looks like and what it should feel like. And EVP is a huge part of it, is making sure that as Kelly said earlier, every single touch point from someone noticing your company, being interested, because being interested doesn't mean applying. Being interested could be reaching out to two people that are already there to say, hey, is this actually true? And what do you think? Are you there long term, or are you thinking about leaving? Every single touch point of a candidate throughout that process has to be completely transparent. The application process has to be, as I said earlier, transparently put into the market. And then when you're interviewing, your interviewers have to, for me, a big one for me is not hiring for same as me, and also being completely transparent throughout the process as to what your experience has been. Don't sugarcoat it, because people then coming in will realize very quickly that it's sugarcoated. And that EVP message has to, I know that it's important for it to be external, but it's also equally as important for the internal organization to be communicated slightly differently, possibly because it's an internal comms, on here's what we're doing for EVP, here's how we're changing, here's how you can help us change that. And the interviewers throughout that process have to be involved in that. And if that means internal communication, internal education, training, workshops, then so be it. I used to love doing internal workshops with all of the interviewing group globally, especially as Zip grew into US, Mexico, Canada, UK, etc. in my very short 12 months. And we got the chance to bring in new people and say, here's what we're all about. And here's how you could communicate in an interview. We're not telling you how to do it. You have to be your own person. Inclusivity is a huge thing for me, and bringing your whole self to work, which companies publicize and then don't deliver on, and some do publicize and do deliver on. But for me, that's probably the big things. And whether you have to go through the internal training mechanisms to get to that, so be it. But yeah, I mean, during the interview process, it has to be, I'll go back to transparency and honesty always. It has to be transparent and honest. People can't be sugarcoating what the organization's like before you bring someone in. And if you are transparent and that's not for that candidate, then so be it. You move on to the next. You want people who are engulfed and then become brand ambassadors, as per the previous question, once they're actually on board. But yeah, EVP during that interview process has to be communicated internally and externally. And the internal side has to be often educated or workshopped to get people to that level of knowing what the company wants and needs, not just for now, because that's recruitment, but the talent acquisition phases of what's needed long-term and how do you consistently hire that.
I love that. Thank you. Just looking at time, we are out of time. But Kelly, do you think we could send everyone the homework afterwards?
Possibly. It's just, yeah, I could find a way to make it make sense to people.
We could do a quick Loom video maybe and add that in the comments.
Yeah. No, it's more, I'll share my screen. I'll do it very quickly, guys. Very quickly, I promise. Because I'll figure out which screen I need to share to this time.
I just got a vision of like
right, I'm doing a really good job of it. Oh, it's and then not in order, unfortunately. Is that sharing? Yes.
Yeah.
So just for people like to, when this is like for a job post, if you were a creative way of explaining what is on offer and what people could look forward to. And so this is just, it's an exercise called scene setting. And I guess the activity was I wanted people to read it before I told them what it was. So maybe when you watch the replay, having a read of this as an example, and then from that, first thinking like, what's actually being sold here? Because this is a sales pitch, but it doesn't feel like a sales pitch because it's story. So it's just, yeah, hoping to get people to think differently about how they can be showing up and communicating like their marketing messages and pitches. The activity then is to sit down. It's coming. You're filling a role in your team. And I use this as the example because it's much easier to think about. You're more familiar with the people in your team and what you need in your team. If you're a TA and you're hiring for other business groups, just think about if you're filling a role in your team, what is the best thing about your workplace or the team or the role? Like what do you love most? And have a think about a scene or an experience or something that demonstrates it so that you can sell the opportunity but without actually being salesy, because I think this is something that cripples people as well when they need to show up online. How do I sell? I hate selling. It feels gross for me too. But yeah, so that's the example, and then go back to the written copy to, I guess, to see my take on that. But yeah, hopefully that gives people some inspiration.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And thank you both for today. It's been really awesome. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cool. We'll see you soon.
See you, everyone.